Today we're remodeling the old Wombat Habitat because F that old Wombat Habitat, and we're also adding a hamburger place because why not? Alright, so the entire idea behind the Wombat Habitat remodel was I want to have less visible fences because the original Wombat Habitat was just fences all around, and I actually want to make it so that the fences in Naturalis are a little bit less visible so that everything feels more open and accessible. However, there's still, of course, a tiny fence just because instead of a fence, now the Wombat Habitat has a moat. And we all know that people are dumbasses and they will just yeet themselves into that moat. One of those dumbasses is speaking right now. Well, actually, I wouldn't go and yeet myself into the moat, but I would definitely step over a tiny fence just to get a closer look. So yeah, we're making this habitat poison proof. Actually not, because again, I would step over the fence a bit. But I placed a moat because I thought like, oh yeah, wombats, they won't swim. No, those little fuckers did swim. So I had to also throw in a huge buttload of rocks so that they couldn't climb out. And that makes it only more appealing for me to actually go over the fence because climbing. I climbed trees as a child. I still want to go rock climbing. I did it once in like, I think Switzerland or Austria, and I want to do it again. Although I'm also terrified of falling, so that's not really a good combination. Basically, I want to go like rock climbing in like the gyms where they have it all set out and you're on wires and such, because at least I won't fall to my death there. Like, I don't really have a phobia of heights, I have just a phobia of falling. So if there's like, legit, there was this castle in Belgium that I went to when I was younger, and it was like this, it's a castle, so there's a big boat with like the walls there, it's like an 8-meter drop or something, and I was just like, yeah, that doesn't terrify me at all because there's a wall, there's, I think Matriculations that it's called, I kind of forgot. But like there is something there to stop you from falling. Like I would need to be basically a battering ram, which I am when it comes to sports, but not in general life. But I would need to be a battering ram to take that down. But on the other side, there was like a 2-3 meter drop to the inner, like the courtyard of the castle. And that terrified me. Well, maybe I would hurt myself a little from falling that height. Maybe a lot if I fell on my head, but like, it's a 3-meter fall. There was no fence or anything, so it's just like a sheer drop off the wall, and that terrified me. I was hugging those Matriculations, even though on the other side of those there was an 8-meter drop. So yeah, like if there's good fences, I'm not terrified. If there's no fences, or I can imagine myself breaking the fence, then I'm terrified. But anyways, what was the point of this? Oh yeah, so when it comes to the actual fences in the Wombat Habitat, it was just like, they are there to really show like, oh, here's where you shouldn't go, but it doesn't really stop you. But then most regular people wouldn't just yeet themselves into the moat. There are idiots who will do that, but you know, it makes it so that the regular people don't go into the habitat, and also that the wombats don't go out of their habitat, of course. But yeah, with the original habitat, I really just like, I really like the idea still of like having like multiple sections that are connected with bridges. But because the hitboxes of the animals are usually large, you need quite large bridges, or just like, you know, do it in a different way so that the bridge is not so apparent. And with Wombat, you can't really, well, in the version that I built, you can't really do that because the actual bridge had to be quite low, so it was constantly in your face. But talking about bridges and heights, yeah, I made an elevated walkway, and I will probably do this more in Naturalis because I just like the height difference. It adds a little bit of interest to it, and I know that like, it's not really that easy or nice for like people who have issues when it comes to mobility. Calling it issues with mobility for me sounds wrong. There's probably a better term for it, so please let me know down below in the comments for like a general term to describe basically people who struggle with like walking for long periods of time, or when it comes to like inclines and ramps and staircases and wheelchairs and people will use crutches. Probably there isn't a general term for that, but let me know because I would love to know. But yeah, having the height differences probably doesn't really work well when it comes to those groups. So I am thinking of like, oh yeah, I need to just have the wheelchair lift so that like if you have any issues with mobility, if you struggle with ramps or staircases or just long periods of walking, there should probably be something there. And it's not that difficult to make a lift that just goes over the stairs, that has like a platform that just brings you up to the top level. However, the one thing that I am just constantly thinking of, and this is just my chaotic self coming true full on, is I want to make a wheelchair coaster. It's not at all realistic, it's probably not safe, but I constantly have the image of like, you have those coasters or roller coasters where you can set the speed yourself, you can put on the brakes and such. It's pretty much something like that. And I just keep thinking like, oh yeah, if you strap like a wheelchair in there, in like a sort of cart that is designed for that, you could have a much just more interesting way of getting up or down. But then I realized, yeah, that's probably not safe. That's probably just a dumbass thing that you shouldn't do. But my brain is just like, yeah, that sounds like fun. My brain is just letting that live in there rent-free just forever. But yeah, so there's probably going to be more like elevation differences in Naturalis, but I will try and think of people with limited mobility. I think that's probably the better word for it than mobility issues. But yeah, anyways, the other thing that I wanted to build for the Wombat Habitat is just a little outpost kind of area, like an area where you can rest. There's like one shop, in this case it's a hamburger shop, and then there is a staff area, maybe there's a toilet, a first aid post, that, but nothing else. It's not a place where you really spend like your lunch or anything. It's like a place where you grab something, maybe take a quick break, and then you move on to any of the like bigger places, like a food court or restaurant or anything like that. This is just a tiny hangout place. I haven't built a full hangout place because this video would have been 30 minutes long then. So we are just building the hamburger place and the staff facility here, or the keeper facility where they prepare the food and such, because I kind of forgot to really think of facilities. But yeah, this is also just a big opportunity for me to really make it so that like the Australia section, the Asian section, and the African section in Naturalis are very distinct. So when it comes to the Australia section, I really want this sort of, I don't want to say tribal, but just this sort of more, I don't know how to call it, but this more organic look to it. And then when it comes to the Asian area, I want it to be very sleek and make it feel like it's almost sharp enough to cut yourself on. And then with the African area, really have this, I have an idea of like this sort of beachy area. Well, actually that's also the vibe for the Australian area, but for the African area it's a little bit different. It's also of course drawing on like African cultures and architecture, so there's that. But then there's another thing that I wanted to talk about that's not build related actually, and that is The reason why I was so unhinged in my past few videos, I finally discovered what it was. I'm just crazy, though that's 24/7, that's nothing new, but I have recently turned in or submitted my college and internship thesis, or basically just college thesis. I submitted it last week on Thursday, and it kind of was a funny day because I did get the advice of like, oh, don't spend too long like on it. Well, not in general, but on like the little details at the end, because at the end there's constantly things that you want to like, oh, I want to change this little thing and this little thing, and then you end up just going in a loop of changing such insignificant things that you might end up with a worse product just because you are seeing flaws where there aren't actually. So the deadline for submitting my college thesis was at like 4 p.m. I was completely finished at 12, so I submitted it then. And of course, at 1 p.m. I had a freak out thinking of like, hey, did I actually submit it right? Did I check all of the boxes and everything? Because I have to submit it online. So yeah, I had a bit of a freak out and checked it all. And then afterwards, because I was at work, or I was at my place of internship, and then I basically could go for the rest of the day because yeah, submitting a college thesis is kind of the biggest deal in mine. Yeah, probably mine, because I don't know about colleges everywhere, but submitting my college thesis was probably the biggest thing in my college life ever, and I was just completely just destroyed, because even though I said like, oh yeah, you shouldn't change like the little things, that's like the end of the road, like little things. Before that, there's still a lot of things, so I was basically just working all of the weeks before, well, all of the months before, because of course it took in all 9 months, but yeah. Anyways, the whole thing was just like submitting it at 12, then checking it at 1 p.m, then checking it again at 4 p.m, because hey, if there's like any kind of thing that went wrong, if I didn't check it at 4, then too late. If things went wrong, I have to wait 3 months again to submit it, and I didn't want to do that. And then as soon as I did that, I was just completely destroyed. And I walked to my bed, fell in, and slept for 12 hours. Yeah, so I've basically been living off adrenaline for the last few weeks. Didn't realize that because I was sleeping regularly and normally, but it's a weird feeling when you have that like constant worry in the back of your mind of like, oh, I need to work on my thesis, I need to work on my thesis, I need to work on that, and I need to be finished. And as soon as you don't have that anymore, it's just like brain doesn't compute, brain doesn't want what's going on, brain goes into shutdown mode. And it basically stayed there for the rest of the weekend. Luckily, I don't work on Fridays, so that was, nice. But yeah, I didn't realize that I was just working on adrenaline 24/7 basically. Because like it's such an important thing that you're basically busy with it. Maybe not physically and like actively, but mentally 24/7. And you're like, even after submitting it, you're constantly thinking like, oh, I could have done that, or I didn't do that. Such things. But yeah, I'm now very happy. Like the only things that I still have to do is a presentation of my thesis and defending it and such. And then all of that is finished. And then I can breathe. Well, actually, I can breathe now already because I'm kind of worried about the presentation because I'm not that good of a with presentations. I mean, you might think like, oh, Poison, but you don't have any issue talking here in these videos. Yeah, I'm alone in my room. It's very different when you're actually putting your life your future at stake. Not really my life, like the professors are not going to kill me if I fail at the presentation. I just have to redo it then. But I don't want to redo it because I just don't. Anyways, so that was pretty much the biggest thing in the last few weeks, and it's also the reason why this video got delayed, because I was just mentally not really there. Not in like, oh, a bad way or something, but I was just so exhausted that I just wanted to sleep. And I'm just like really getting out of that. So although I'm feeling that like this video, compared to the last few ones, especially the tier list for the benches, but also the other ones, is probably the most sane one. Probably because I'm not working off adrenaline anymore. But anyways, back to the actual build. Again, it's a miracle that I'm actually talking about the builds instead of, well, the other thing that I wanted to talk about, made an entire voiceover over, then noticed or really sunk in that like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to get me demonetized. Maybe actually this is not a good thing, because yeah, it might make it into a very mature video if I talk about it. Even though it's really funny to me, it's just like, yeah, maybe let's not share that with the world. And that's like the funniest thing. I've completely lost all sense of shame ever since doing YouTube. But anyways, talking about the actual build again, there's a lot of rocks. I'm not good with rock work, but I know how to stack rocks in a way that looks slightly natural. And then also, it's a zoo, so it's never going to look completely natural, because they always have to like think of like, oh, how do we make it so that the animals don't get here or there? And so you might see like a really big pile of rocks to prohibit them walking over it. Even though in nature that wouldn't really be the case. So yeah, I really like how it ended up. I wanted to have like a beachy vibe, but slightly more structure as well. Have very organic shapes in the buildings. And then also, when it came to the landscaping with like the flower beds and such, or just plant beds, because there's not actual flowers in it. Well, there are the purple plants, which I kind of count as flowers, but there's no actual flowers, it's just leaves. But I wanted to add a little bit of color to really set it apart from the African area, because they have kind of a similar vibe going on with like a sort of beachy vibe. But whereas when it comes to the Australian area, it's more of a beachy surfer vibe. With the African area, it's more of a beachy desert luxury vibe. And also slight inspiration from Black Panther. So there's that. But when it comes to the Australian area, I'm really happy that I decided to make it more unique. Not have it like be completely realistic, because of course these plants wouldn't survive in the Netherlands unless they would be under like 24/7 care, because you know, the nature, the climate and such is so different. But I really just like that it's like you can immediately tell when you're in the African area or the Australian area or the Asian area, because the nature and the building style just completely reflects like, oh, you are in a completely different area. Whereas with Eve's Zoo, I kind of try to mimic, like, make it so that everything is cohesive, and here I'm just like, fuck this, I want to build whatever I want and just make it as extra as possible. Anyways, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, throw a wombat at the like button and maybe subscribe. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.